What's up guys, Manga time once again. I'm here today to bring you my review of Bleach 653, the Theatre Suicide Scene 7, presumably the last Theatre Suicide title we're going to receive, based on the events of this chapter anyway. Before we begin, please subscribe to my channel, I'd super appreciate the support. Once again, it's awesome, you guys have got me over 700 subs, that's just amazing. Do subscribe to my other channel as well, where I talk about other stuff I enjoy. I did recently just upload a massive review of Star Wars Battlefront, and there's going to be some cool stuff on there, like based on Bloodborne and stuff like that, and games that are coming out now. So yeah, if you're interested in that, please do check out one of these links up here somewhere. I'd super appreciate it. But anyway, guys, this chapter review is coming out on a very weird day because the chapter only just came out today, and that's down to, I believe, some kind of disturbances going on over on the other side where this all comes from. That, you know, when the scanlators upload their raws, they've been getting into a bit of trouble for that, and so it's kind of thrown everything into disarray. So we're lucky to actually get a chapter anyway. So this chapter's been quite divisive again, like last time, because a lot of people have been complaining about the lack of content and the ending and everything like that. We'll get into that as we go on. So it starts off with a flashback. Wasn't expecting this. And it's interesting that despite the fact that Kubo told us that the secret behind Shunsui's Hayori will be revealed, that's actually the pinwheel hairpins that are actually getting more of a storyline to them. However, that's also interesting because Kubo almost in a way foreshadowed that, because we're back in a long time ago, when he gave us a bit of a description for Shunsui, possibly in a data book, I believe it was. He said something along the lines of the flower kimono and the obi sash that he wears are very, very cheap. However, the pinwheel hairpins are incredibly expensive. You know, so that just lends that idea that they might be important. So it's cool that we get this kind of backstory here, and I do like seeing relatives of characters as well, because that's just awesome, and it lends a depth to the world. So basically, it's Shunsui's brother, who strangely doesn't have a name. Neither does Nanao's mum, actually, I don't think. But anyway, obviously he's the husband of Nanao's mum, and she's given him one hairpin. Or actually, I believe he's actually giving her the hairpin, I believe, and she only wants one of them. And he says, you know, why is only one of them fine? And she says, you know, I want you to take the other one. When I'm suppressing hollows and you're not around, you know, it's nice knowing you're holding on to one of the same things I am. So it's interesting that Nanao's mum suppresses hollows. Presumably then she is a Shinigami, because obviously Kyoraku's brother's a Shinigami. So one can imagine she must be, and she must use the God Sword to do it, which is interesting. Unless, of course, she just doesn't suppress hollows with the sword. It could be that she's a Kido user. But I thought that was interesting. So she gives Shunsui's brother that, and then there's a really good panel of Shunsui, obviously again as a young guy, pulling a really funny face at his brother because of all the, you know, the sappiness that was going on. His brother smacks him in the face, and he's like, you know, what's that face for? And, you know, go home and study or something. Presumably then this is when Shunsui is in the academy, because it looks like he's wearing at least some variation of the academy uniform. But this is cool though, because Shunsui's brother is obviously older than him, and he's a Shinigami before Shunsui. I do wonder, his brother's actually dead now, isn't it, I believe. It would have been interesting to see what he'd have thought of Shunsui now that, you know, Shunsui's the freaking Captain Commander of all people. But anyway, you know, Shunsui's like, oh, you've really mellowed in your old age, brother. And, you know, he says, you know, it's not like I made a conscious effort to change, but I've grown calm and content thanks to Nanao's mum, basically. Which Shinsui's happy about. And I do like this. I think it's cool. And it's very cool getting to see more of Shunsui himself. But what's interesting about Shinsui's flashbacks is that they're not focusing on him. They're focusing on the relationships of those around him. He's merely a spectator to most of it. So while we are getting to see him when he's younger, he isn't really the focus point of most of this. So I think that's quite interesting. So basically, we then obviously move on to, we see that the flower pins that Nanao's mum had and that his brother had are now, Shunsui now owns both of them, obviously because they're both dead. And he said, I believe it was in the last chapter, he said something along the lines of, why do these people who keep dying keep, you know, giving me their most precious belongings? It's a serious burden. Anyway, the Theatre Suicide Scene 7 is framed quite cool by the two pinwheels. I like that, that's pretty cool. And we then return to Nanao versus Lil Barrow. And Nanao basically goes flying after she connects her sword with Lil. And I did think this was a bit strange, because I was thinking to myself, why is she attacking him like that again, exactly the same way? But this is actually one of those moments where Kubo goes back in time to a point before the end of last chapter. And this is not a very popular kind of thing that Kubo does. People don't like this because a lot of the time people think that he's wasting pages. Because essentially what's happened here is, at the end of last week, Nanao tried to attack Lille, but he deflected her and then she was really scared and then Shunsui showed up. But what we're getting now is we get Nanao's thoughts and feelings on the matter before Shunsui shows up. And I actually kind of like it, because it does lend a bit more depth to Nanao. She goes flying and she's like, oh my god, I had no idea that fighting with a blade was this scary. And I like that because it adds a level of depth and humanity to her that might not have been there before necessarily. Despite her fear, she does raise the blade again. And she's like, I can't believe it's this frightening. And then she realises that she's actually been cut and there's blood running down her leg and onto her foot. And she's like, oh, it hurts so much, it hurts so much. And I think this is a really quite refreshing amount of realism, because people in Bleach get bloody slashed all the time. There's like spurts of blood, especially earlier in the series, and no one really made any comments about it. But I like how Nanao is, bringing a level of humanity to this. She's like, oh, it really hurts, and I'm so scared, I can't move. And it's quite, some people might argue, oh my god, why is she, it's annoying that she's so pathetic and afraid, but I think it adds a level of depth to her, and it makes her more of a three-dimensional character. Because we know that Nanao, it is just her character that she doesn't fight much. She's a Kido user, rarely out on the front lines, and facing an enemy of this caliber as well. So it's quite cool when Shunsui appears behind her and he puts his hand on hers and basically puts her at ease, essentially. However, Lille is still doing his thing, and he's summoning that massive orb in the air above him, and he sees, as the light clears, that Shunsui is there. And he says, so you've decided to come out and play, but you're hiding behind your own subordinate. That's pathetic. And then Lille activates this actually very cool ability. I really like it. It's quite original. That ball of light transforms into a big trumpet, and Lille is like, playing the trumpet almost. And he says, what a sad excuse for a commander. Listen to the sound of my trompet, which apparently means God's trumpet, and perish. And I like that a lot, because everybody knows that, biblical references, angels play trumpets for God, that sort of thing. And I just think it's awesome. I think Lille, the connection between all of this religious stuff that he's been doing lately and the fact that he used to be a sniper is tenuous at best. Like, my only kind of grasp on his theme is that he's a judge. He must be a judge, because obviously angels, they're known to judge. He calls people sinners, he judges them, and I suppose maybe when he was the sniper it's considered the same deal, that he's very like, one shot, that's my judgment, I'm making my judgment sort of thing. I don't really know. I kind of think judgment in general is just Lil's theme, that I guess. But anyway, Shunsui's like, let's go Nanao, and don't worry, I'll always be right behind you. And so I like this because I think I think it works really well, and it really helps you kind of get the whole, this is their relationship. Like, Nanao right now is standing up to one of the most powerful enemies we've ever seen in Bleach, but she's not alone. I like that. Shinsui's kind of like, we can do this, you can do this, I will be here with you, you just have to face him. And I like it because we get this little flashback that's like Nanao saying, I returned to help him, and now he's supporting me, I can face him. And then we get this really cool picture of Nanao where she's got a very like this determined look on her face. And the battle kind of ends essentially by Lille firing the trumpet, and it's this enormous blast that literally just raises some of this floating city, just annihilates loads of it. It looks like, at first glance, I thought that the city had been like split like that, but actually it's a huge hole has been blown out of the centre of it. However, Lille has been severed basically in half, and at first it's a bit like, what the hell? But it does make a lot of sense, because all that's really happened is Nanao has reflected his blast back at him. So he's essentially blown the trumpet, and the moment it's fired, it's come straight back at him, and it's just like annihilated half his face. And I kind of like this because he doesn't ever quite seem to realise what's happened, despite the enormity of what has happened. He looks down at the ground, and Nanao is just standing there with Shunsui on this tiny little platform. Everything else has been annihilated, but that tiny little platform just reflected straight back at Lille. And Nanao's looking like a badass because she's kind of like that on the sword, and the sword is obviously reflected back at Lille. And he tries to like feel for his face, but there's obviously nothing there anymore, and it's been so completely obliterated that he that there is just literally, it's just flat. And this is kind of cool because I thought at first he might be rebuilding himself, but he sort of goes, he's like, oh yeah, I see. That your sword reflects the ability of a god. I forgot about that. And as he's saying this, his body is just completely like cracking into a million pieces, and he's in denial. He's either in denial or he just simply doesn't realise that he's about to die. He says, to claim to be able to brush away the power of a god, such a preposterous pretense. And as he says this, his body just shatters into a million pieces, and leaving only his wings. And he says, is a grave sin indeed. And he appears to die, although I'll get into that in a bit more in a minute. As he says this, Shunsui and Nanao look on as basically his body just turns into a bunch of lights. And I have to say, I love that final page. I think it's really powerful and really evocative, and I think it looks awesome. So the ending of the chapter, people don't like it, and I kind of see why. For a fight that's been going on this long, it feels anticlimactic and rushed, but then frankly, most of Kubo's endings do. And I think it's a problem with the medium more than Kubo necessarily, because you follow a fight for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it has to end eventually. And this is the ending. It has to end on a week, and then you feel like I've been following this fight now for 10 weeks, and it's all of a sudden over. If Kubo continues to end it, it has to be a continuation of the ending next week. It might not feel so bad, but I feel like it is possibly more that Lille has just been annihilated in essentially one hit. I kind of like it though, because it's like Lille's building up for this enormous final attack, and it just wipes him out. And I kind of liked that in a way. I thought it was quite good. It was quite fitting that he just got annihilated in one hit. He essentially got Barragoned because his power was obviously so OP. He had to kill himself. Although I have to admit that it is peculiar that he's actually dying, because Shunsui cut his head off. So presumably, I don't see why losing half of his body destroyed him. The only thing I can think of is because he's a Quincy, and it was his own power that did it. It completely annihilated his Reishi. Because obviously Quincy can do that. So possibly that's why he died, because he was obliterated by his own power. There is obviously also the theory that he's not actually dead. And I have to admit that it's a weird ending for a villain. I do appreciate that he didn't die ranting and raving, because that just gets annoying. He actually, despite all his talking about how much of a god he is, he actually died with quite a cool line. But I definitely get where people who don't think he's died are coming from, because it's a very, very weird ending. Like, his body just disperses, and he says, oh, it's a grave sin indeed. But I think that's probably him just dying, and not quite realising it, which I like as well. He doesn't realise that his body is just shattering, and then he just suddenly breaks, and that's it for him. So, I don't know, I kind of liked the ending. I get why it's divisive. I did kind of like it. And as for the fight itself, I thought it was really enjoyable. Again, another really enjoyable Elite fight. I have my issues with it. Like, I think Shinsui's Bankai should have been more effective. But I liked how Nanao came in. It was technically Nanao who killed him, because she reflected his own attack back at him. Shunsui didn't really do anything other than give her the courage to fight him. So that was interesting. I've got to be honest, I don't really like how easy Lille was killed, because literally Nanao could have pulled this weapon out at the beginning of the fight and then just reflected it, and that was it. He'd been dead in one hit. So I kind of feel like that was a bit crap, in a way. And there wasn't any real sacrifice made in this fight. Like, obviously Nemu died in the last fight, whereas this one, obviously Shinsui's taken a huge beating, but I think maybe we need to see where next week goes, because maybe they're not going to get out of this as lightly as it seems. But for now, it appears that is the end of the fight between Shunsui and Lil Barrow. It did last quite a long time. These Elite fights do appear to be lasting ages, which I'm perfectly happy with, because I love it. Next up, presumably Gerard Valkyrie, the Miracle, versus that whole gaggle of Shinigami, though I wouldn't be surprised if a bunch of them were already defeated. That's very Kubo. For us to go back and say Shinji's probably still standing, because I'd be surprised if we don't get his Bankai soon. Maybe Renji and Rukia, and probably Byakuya, but other than that, I'd be surprised. But yeah, I liked the chapter. I get why it's divisive. I'm probably going to give it a 3 out of 5. I thought it was solidly decent. There wasn't a huge lot going on in there. I enjoyed the flashback though. I really hope Lil gets one this week, but at this point, I think we all know that it's unlikely. But I feel like Kubo went in depth enough with this. Like, Kubo showed off Lil quite a lot. I feel like he definitely deserves at least a couple of pages, if not a bit more. But we'll see if we get that lucky. So I think that's everything for this week's chapter, guys. Do let me know in the comments below what you thought of the chapter. Please subscribe, and like I said before, do you think Lille's dead? I think that's probably the big question of the week. Oh, and what did you think of the fight's ending? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bullcrap and cheap? Let me know in the comments below, guys. I'd super appreciate it. But until next time, see you later.